Well, I completely agree with Richard, and I find it fascinating that that from a developed country perspective, one would look at developing countries and say they're not doing anything, hence why should I? That's a very interesting turning of the tables that is new to me. I always like learning new things, and that's my new lesson today, because frankly, I've never heard that argument. I hear it from developing countries' perspective. I hear from developing countries say developed countries are not doing enough, so why should I? But for a developed country that has clear historical responsibility to say developing countries are not doing enough, hence why should I? The answer is very clear, because you have historical responsibility, one. Two, because you have the capability, you have the technology to do it. You have contributed to the problem and you can contribute to the solution. So the answer is very clear. Now, in addition to that, as Richard has said, it is a complete falsehood to say the developing countries are not doing anything. All we have to do to change that mindset, as you say, is to look at the numbers, to look at the new 5-year plan, the 12th 5-year plan of China, to see what their new renewable energy targets are, what their energy efficiency targets are. You can look at the 11th plan and see that they actually overshot their targets, and they will probably overshoot their 12th 5-year plan. You can look at India, and you can look at their energy efficiency mission, their renewable energy mission, and their forestry mission, just to take 3 out of 11, and you can see what India is doing. You can look at Brazil, and you can look at the targets of reduction of deforestation that they have taken, because that is where Brazil contributes to emissions, since they have such a clean energy mix. Their problem is deforestation, and you can say Brazil is doing its thing. You can look at Mexico. Honestly, I don't know where you're looking to say the large developing countries are not doing anything. And let us be clear, they're doing it, as I said before, because it is in their national interest. And that's the beauty of climate change. We really have to change this mindset about these burdens about climate change. There is no measure that you can put in place to address climate change that doesn't have a host of co-benefits that come with it that positively affect your national economic development. And that's the beauty of it. So why wouldn't they do it? They're doing it. It is actually, as Richard has said, the developed countries that frankly are dragging their feet, because you have the historical responsibility, you have the capability, and you have to remain in the lead.
Thank you very much for a beautiful statement. And the reason I stick in this issue is because now we are talking about Japanese commitment. 25%, as you know, is contingent upon the ambitious, effective commitment by major economies, including not only developing countries, but developed countries like US. And I'm very happy to see the face of Mr. Homt here, and maybe we can listen to his opinion later. So then could you, but still, again, playing devil's advocates, people see like United States, federal level, they are very dysfunctional, and they are not going to commit any legally binding things in at least in the near future, because Obama administration cannot deliver any helpful, meaningful things to UNFCCC. So how do you see this situation in the United States?
Well, first, I don't think that the United States is dysfunctional. I think it functions according to the political complexity that it has at the moment. The Obama administration in Copenhagen made a pledge to cut emissions by 17% from a 2005 baseline. I have no reason to believe that they're going to veer away from that. They recommitted to the same target in Cancun, and I have full expectation that the United States is going to meet or beat that target. As Richard has already said, more importantly, the United States has as its long-term target an 80% cut by the year 2050. And has, in fact, already under the Obama administration, probably more than any other country in the world, has already established the clear path that is going to take them from where they are now to 2050. That's probably not very known around the world, but it's a pretty impressive planning that the United States has made. Now, of course, you can say, well, who's going to guarantee that that's going to happen? Well, first, I have no reason, as I said before, I have no reason to believe that the Obama administration is going to veer away from that. Despite the fact that there are many efforts on Capitol Hill to stop the Obama administration, the latest news that we have is that EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency of the United States, is moving forward with regulation on carbon emissions. In addition to that, I would say there are many states in the United States that, in addition to the federal level commitments, have actually already embraced pretty ambitious state level targets and that are moving forward. So, yes, it's very easy to do US bashing, but I think one needs to look a little bit beyond the surface to see what they're doing. And I ask, how do I know that the United States is actually going to do it? Well, maybe the United States will eventually come into a legally binding agreement with all other countries. But more importantly than that, since we know, by the way, that legally binding agreements are no guarantee, look at Canada. Canada signed and ratified the Kyoto Protocol and has done absolutely nothing about it. So going into a legally binding agreement is not a guarantee that you're going to do it. Much more importantly than that, much more importantly, I have the trust that the United States private sector will soon wake up and realize that they are being left behind in this race, and that contrary to what the narrative is now, they're going to want to rescue their competitive advantage versus large developing countries that are coming to the table, and that the breadth and depth of technological capacity in the United States is actually going to make the United States to meet or beat its targets.
Thank you very much. I just wish to come back to the issue of developed country pledges or commitments contingent on certain factors. And Professor Asuka just mentioned that the Japanese pledges are contingent on the participation of all major emitters, and the pledge, their pledge should be fair and at the level of comparable ambition. And although the European Commission's, European Union's pledges, the conditions are not well clearly stated, but the thinking behind the range of pledges, commitments between 20 and 30% reduction, maybe the thinking might be a similar one. So the question would be that as we move forward to operationalize the Cancun agreements, and if in Durban or any future COP meetings, hopefully as early as possible, but in Durban, if we would be able to finalize our work to operationalize Cancun agreements, then perhaps the participation of major emitters would be secured, with the anchoring pledges by different major emitters. I remember that Ms. Figueres mentioned that how the international agreements can help Japan, or maybe can help other developed countries in maintaining or even raising the level of ambition. So in that regard, of course, this is a serious question for Japan, but may I ask Mr. Oppenheim that the agreements to be reached in Durban or any other occasion, do you think, would it help European Union to raise the level of ambition and to agree on the 30% reduction target?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think we have to remember here that the pledges that were given at Cancun take us 60% of the way to a 2-degree, confining the temperature rise to 2 degrees. In fact, it takes us closer to 4 degrees. So that means that we need to be more ambitious than we are already being, clearly. And that's what's behind the 30%, as well as the opportunities that we believe exist and the fact that we think it's actually in our economic interest as well to go to 30 degrees. I mean...
To 30%.
30%, sorry.
30 degrees, now we would have a big
problem. We would have a big problem. That's true. Thank you. I mean, I would ask a question back to Japan. I mean, what is fair? What is comparable? When you talk about being conditional, I would say that for the UK, we've already said that, incidentally, within the EU, 20% means different things to different countries. To the UK, it means 34%. And we've already committed to that in our own domestic law. So we'll be doing that anyway. If we go to 30%, it means 42% for the UK. And these are challenging targets. It's not going to be easy. But I think these are commitments that we're making whatever. We're not attaching conditions to 20% or 30%. And I would hope that Japan's condition would be a flexible condition and as a way to encourage other countries to come on board, rather than a way to try and kind of escape from having to do it. That's the way I would hope that would be seen.
Thank you very much. And
ありがとうございます。
there are many ways of defining what would be the fair and comparable commitments or pledges, and who would define these two criteria. So in that regard, of course, there are many views held by different stakeholders in Japan on that point. But at the same time, it would be very important, in my view, that the international community would launch a meaningful process of defining these fairness and comparability of efforts. So in that regard, already we have reached important agreements in Cancun on that point. So I sincerely hope that this process will moving forward, and international community would help the individual developed countries, including Japan or European Union, so that different stakeholders, views of different stakeholders within the developed countries, including Japan or European Union, can be convinced that other major emitters are committing or pledging the fair and similarly ambitious or comparable commitments. So that is my view, but maybe Professor Asuka may have different views on that.